One of the most useful hand tools is the hand plane. Probably second, as far as I'm concerned, to a chisel. So being able to set this up, get it sharp, and use it efficiently is key to making it worthwhile. So I'm going to show you how to do that. So I'm going to assume you have a sharp blade. This blade was just sharpened. It's got a slight crown or a curve on the edge. And I've got the chip breaker here, so I'm going to put this back together. Always remember that when you're assembling this, to put this on at an angle, 90 degrees, slide the chip breaker back, and then turn it onto the blade, and then we want to move it forward. I want the blade, in general, maybe I want the chip breaker maybe about a 30-second back of the blade. You can make that smaller for a smoothing plane. This is my jack plane. I'm going to put it fairly close, maybe a little less than a 30-second from the edge. I want to get it even too, so I'm looking at the reflection. I've got a light over here. I'm looking at the reflection of the blade, the face of the blade there, and that's allowing me to get a good handle on what that setback is. So that looks pretty good. I'll use a screwdriver here to tighten that up. I want to double check because sometimes in tightening this, if the screw isn't quite right, when you tighten this, it'll move the chip breaker. This is not happening on this particular one. So I'll get that nice and snug. So that looks good. One tip that you can do if you have a small hammer is to, you can tap back and forth. If I want to move it forward, I'll tap here. If I want to move the chip breaker back, I'll tap the blade. Sometimes that can help in fine-tuning the location, but that looks good now. Before I put this back in the plane, I want to make sure the bed of the frog is nice and clean. It looks like it is. So I'm going to drop that in. I want to make sure the blade does not hit any part of the plane there. I want to make sure that's sitting down on the Y adjusting lever tab there, and I also want to make sure that the washer from the lateral adjuster is fitting into this slot. Okay, and then once that's set, I'm going to center the blade side to side. I'm just looking down into the plane. And put the lever cap on. And it should go down with a little bit of pressure. You know, if you really have to work, then loosen up this screw, or if it feels too loose, maybe tighten the screw a little bit. But it should go down with, I would say, moderate thumb pressure. Okay, next I'm going to look at the underside, right down the sole of the plane, and adjust the blade to the correct lateral adjustment and the correct depth of cut. Okay, I've got the blade clamped onto my bench so I can show how this looks to me when I'm adjusting it. So if I look on this right side here, I can see the blade sticking out further here than it is over here. And note that in order for me to see this, I really have to be looking pretty much right down the sole of the plane. I'm almost even with the plane. If I look up from a higher angle, I can just see the mouth of the plane, but I can't really see the blade sticking up like I can from this view. Also, I want to point out some people, when they first try to do this, they hold the plane here and try and do it. And obviously I can't see what's happening if I do that either. So you have to have a clear view straight down the sole. You have to be looking at a light colored surface. The lighter the better. So right now I'm looking down at my workbench. If I put a piece of paper there, it even makes it more visible what's happening. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to first, since the blade is sticking out on the right side, I'm going to grab the lateral adjuster and I'm going to move it towards the high side. And as I move it, we should see things start to even up. Okay, I went a little too far, so I'm going to go back to the left a little bit. Okay, and that looks pretty even to me. Maybe a touch heavy on the left, but that's close enough for now. So now that shaving is going to be too thick. So I'm going to back the blade off. So I'm going to turn this in this direction. And there's a lot of play in here right now. So I need to turn it until I feel some resistance. On this particular plane, it goes about 2 turns. Okay, now I'm feeling some resistance. I'm going to keep turning, and you'll see the blade's going to start disappearing. Okay, so I don't see any change now. What I'm looking at, that thin line, is just the mouth. So now I'm going to bring it back forward. So I need to turn the other direction. A lot of play there. Turning, turning, turning. Turning. Okay, I start to feel some resistance. And now I'm going to bring it back out. Don't see anything yet. Don't see anything. Notice I'm going small amounts at a time. Okay, I'm just starting to get a hint of a darker line there. There, it's just starting to come up. You can see it's very subtle. That's probably about right. Now it does look a little heavy towards the left, so I'm going to grab the lateral adjuster, move it that way a little bit. Doesn't take much. There we go. That looks really good. So I'm going to leave it at that, and we'll see how this works. Now, if the setting was too thick, I cannot just unscrew this and back the blade. There we go. I feel it off a little bit. Right? I never want to be taking a shaving when I've backed the blade off to a shaving. So what I would do is I'd back it off maybe a little further than I want to go, and then I'm going to come all the way forward again through that play. Feel a little resistance and just turn it like that. And so that's how you back the blade off. You have to back it off a little too far and then come back forward. I always want to be using the plane as I'm bringing the blade forward, or at least have the adjuster nut snug in that direction. For comparison's sake, this is the angle that you do not want to be looking at your plane. I'm too high up, and what I'm seeing along here is the throat. So as the blade starts to come out, right, I'm actually bringing the blade out a little bit right now, but it's hidden because the line of the mouth is wide because of the angle I'm looking at the plane. So this does not help you in determining your blade setting. You really have to look almost directly down the sole of the plane to get a good feeling for what you're adjusting. The plane is set up about the way it was when I was showed the detail here. So we're going to take a look at the shaving. Okay, so that's not taking much of a shaving. So, of course, the other way to determine where the setting is to try it. So I'm going to turn this, so I'm turning it to the right. Okay, and that's taken a nice shaving in that it's relatively thin, or it's very thin, and the shaving does not come out all the way from the edge of the blade. Now, ideally, I'd like a little wider shaving, so I'm going to turn that just a touch more. I went maybe a 1/16 of a turn. There we go. So that's giving me a very nice shaving now. Still very thin. Could probably go a touch thicker. That was another. There we go. So that's about 2/3 the width of the blade. That looks great. So I'm happy with that. Now let's say I'm going to turn the lateral adjuster here so it's not correct. Okay, so now I'm going to take a shaving. The blade is sticking out a little bit on the right side over here. So I'm going to go right down so that right side of the blade is right down the middle of the board. And I can see the shaving came from that side. So that tells me I've left a plane track there. So let's take a look and see what that looks like. Okay, so I've zoomed in on that, and if I take a flashlight and shine it like that, I can see there's a shadow line there. Okay, so there's a step there, and I can verify that that's a step by looking at it from the other side. So if I do it from that side, I see a light line, dark line from that side. So there's a little bit of a stair step there. So that is just what I expected. I saw the shaving come out from the right side of the plane. So there's our plane track. Okay, I've got the plane set up pretty much the way it was before. So I'm going to take another series of shavings across this board. And because the board's not flat now, I'm not going to get those nice consistent shavings that feather off on either side. So I'm going to start on the left side. I always want to start about halfway off of the board. Okay, so I can see that the left side of the shaving is sharp edge, but that's because it's the left side of the board. So I'll move over here. Okay, so that looks pretty good. I'm going to slightly adjust that. And I'm going to move across the board. Now, I didn't take a shaving there, but remember there's a kind of a slope down here and a sharp edge here. So if I go right here, I don't think I'm going to take anything. But if I move to here, now remember that track is right in the middle here, I should get a sharp edge shaving. It's a sharp edge, but coming off of the middle of the plane. So that should tell me something. It tells me what I would expect, that there's a step there. Now if I continue moving over, I'm back to my normal shaving. And I'm moving over by a little more than the width of the shaving each time. So I'm going to take another series of shavings across here. I can just barely feel that step now. So I'm thinking I'll get a fairly consistent. Okay, that was still a little hollow there. Okay, that was the middle of the board, so that looks good now. Okay, one more set, and I think we'll get consistent shavings all the way across. That one looks great. That looks good. That's good. So the thickness, the width of the shaving is telling me how much to move over each time. And so now I'm getting consistent shavings. So I'm confident that the board is flat again. All right, I'm going to turn this board over. This other surface is off of the jointer. So it looks fairly rough. That's certainly not smooth. I can see a hint of snipe there. If I look closely, I can see the knife marks on there. If I look from the other end, looks pretty much the same. So this plane is going to get this much smoother than it currently is, and maybe a touch flatter. Now it's set up the way it was set up previously, but because this board is not as flat as it's going to be, I'm probably not going to get consistent shavings until I've made a few sets of passes. So we'll see here. Okay. Okay, so yeah, you can see towards the end I'm not getting a shaving, so I've got a little bit of a snipe there. Okay, so there was one set. Okay, I'm still not getting all the way to the end of the board there. Now, when I'm taking these shavings, I'm picking the plane up and setting it back down. There's a couple of different ways to do that. Another way to do it is to take a shaving and tip the plane up. That keeps my reference. What I don't want to do is just drag the plane back. There's two problems with that. One, it dulls the blade, and two, sometimes if you do that, as you come back, it'll suck the shaving down on, and now you've got the shaving in the way of your next pass, and you won't get a consistent pass. So I could tilt it. Depending on the situation, I'll tilt it or just pick it up and move it back. Okay. Except for one spot here, I got consistent shaving. So I'm going to take one more set of passes here. There we go. Okay, now it's taking a shaving all the way to the end of the board. And I want to make sure my last pass, I'm halfway off, and I should see that shaving that's sharp edge on that right side. So that looks great. The other thing I should have pointed out early on is whenever I'm taking a plane shaving or a pass with the plane, I always start lots of pressure at the front, and I'm just pushing forward. As I move through, I've got equal pressure front and back, and as I get towards the end, I ease off on the knob and increase the pressure on the handle. Another thing that can be helpful is a little bit of paraffin wax. So I'll take a little wax, rub it on the bottom of the plane, and that makes the plane glide over the wood a little bit better. Sometimes a lot better, depends on the wood. Okay, so that's basically how to use a plane. Okay, what I showed you was how to plane the face of a board. I want to talk a little bit about planing the edge of a board. So when I was doing the face of the board, I had my hand, my left hand, on the knob, on top of the knob like that, because I really want to put a lot of pressure there. When I'm planing the edge of a board, if I put my hand on the knob, it's not going to give me as much control, and because this is up a little high, it's going to make it a little more tippy. So in a case like this, I'm going to be pressing on the base of the, just above the sole of the plane. So my thumb is going to be there. Because I want to be able to control where the plane sits on the board, I'm going to use my fingers as a fence. So my fingers are essentially going to be like this, but with the plane in between my fingers and the board. So right now I'm centered on the board. Okay, and of course my shaving came from the center of the board, or the center of the plane. Now I didn't get a full shaving at the end, so I'll take one more pass here. Okay, so that gave me a full width, full length shaving. That's what I want. That tells me this is flat. It doesn't mean it's square. So I'll check it. Like that, and it's a little bit high on the right side. So remember, this plane has a little bit of a crown on the blade. So if I move the plane towards the high side of the board, I will remove material on the right side, on this side. So if I move like that, my shaving is heavier on the right because the blade is sticking out more in the middle of the plane. Since I've got that over to the side, that works okay. So I would do that however many times I think I need to do that, and then I'll come back to the middle, make sure I get one complete pass, full length, full width, and I should be good to go. Now, one thing that often happens, particularly if you're not paying attention to the pressure, right? Pressure at the front in the beginning, pressure at the back at the end. It's very easy to get a little bit of a hump in the middle. So the way to get rid of that is I'm going to take some stopped shavings that start a couple inches in from this end and end a couple inches from here. So I'll start here, come down, and to end the shaving, I'm just going to, as I'm pushing forward, I'm going to lift. Don't just stop and come back, because the shaving will still be attached. So I'll do that one more time. And now there's actually, you can do this as many times as you want. Of course, at some point it's not going to do anything anymore. Then I'm going to go until I get a full length, full width shaving. Okay, in that case it just took one. So I'm confident now that that is straight, flat, square, and does not have a hump in it. So that does wrap it up for using a hand plane.